Hi, dear students, how are you? I hope you're fine. Today we're gonna discuss the personality development. This is very interesting chapter. It talks about the personality of people. So this is very interesting, as I told you, and very exciting. Let's start. When I talk about the personality, I'm talking here about what? I'm talking about the behaviors. The behaviors that make people different from one another. So we have a big difference between behavior and personality. The personality of a person here influences the behavior of this person. So the behaviors make people different from one another. Are those behaviors that psychologists consider to be the root of personality. So, personality here is what makes a person a unique person or different person that's recognizable soon after birth. Personality here refers to what? Enduring characteristics that differentiate or the characters that differentiate between one person from another and lead people to act in here predictable manner both in different situations. So if I, for example, I face a situation, maybe my reaction will be different from the reaction of my friend. Why? Because of our differences in personality. So this is a distinctive and relatively stable pattern of behaviors. So I have here stable pattern of behaviors, predictable behaviors, thoughts, motives, and emotions that characterizes an individual. So each individual of us has what? Has here a stable pattern of, or he has some behaviors, stable behaviors, or I can say fixed thoughts, motives, emotions. Personality development is what? Is the development of the organized pattern of behavior. So I can have as a person some behaviors, stable behaviors, but I can do what I can here, develop those behaviors and those attitudes that makes a person here distinctive. The development here, the development occurs due to what? Occurs due to the ongoing interaction of temperament and character and the environment. So the environment here and the character can be here develop the personality. I have here the personality theory. We have here the psychoanalytic. I have here the trait, the humanistic, and the social cognitive. So when I talk about the psychoanalytic, I'm talking about the unconscious motivation, and we will discuss here each theory. And I have another one which is the trait, specific dimensions of the personality. We will talk about the humanistic inner capacity of growth, and then we'll talk about the social cognitive, which influence the environment. So let's start here with Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud pioneered here personality psychology. So Sigmund Freud here talked about the structure and the development of personality according to him. So this is the psychoanalytic. According to the psychoanalytic of Freud, here much of behavior is caused by what? By parts of personality, which are found in the unconscious of the personality. So he's talking here about what? He's talking here about the unconscious parts of personality which are found in the unconscious and of which we are unaware. So here Freud talks about what? He talks about here the psychoanalytic. He talks about here the unawareness. He thinks, or he thought, that the personality here are found, or much parts of personality are caused here by the unconscious and the which we are unaware of them. Freud's three levels of awareness consciousness: we have the conscious mind, the preconscious mind, and the unconscious mind. So three levels of consciousness. Remember, we took this in quarter one. We took the conscious mind, things we are focusing on, the contact with the outside world, as we know. The preconscious mind, here, things that are not currently aware of, but which we could focus on or we could remember, things we could remember. Unconscious mind, that which we are unaware of, which we are difficult to retrieve material well below the surface of awareness. So this is the unconscious mind. So we're gonna talk about something called id and something called ego and something called super ego this quarter. The id here is the pleasure principle primary process of thinking. Then we're going to talk about the ego, which is the reality principle and secondary process of thinking. Then we're gonna talk about the super ego, which is the moral imperatives. Let's talk about each one of them. Okay. Freud's theory of personality. Freud's theory suggests that the personality is composed of what? He suggested here something called the personality has some components, which are the id, the ego, and the super ego. The id here is what? Is the unorganized, the inborn part of personality, whose purpose is to immediately reduce tensions relating to hunger, aggression, and other primitive impulses. So, this is here the it. So, this is very here automatic or very natural motifs. What about here? What about here the ego? The ego here means that restrains instinctual energy in order to maintain the safety of the individual and to help the person to be a member of society. So here the ego here it's the energy that we do in order to maintain our safety, to be safety as an individual in the environment. What about the super ego? The rights and the wrongs of society and consists of the conscious and the ego ideal. So here the super ego here to see what's right and what's wrong here in the society. So, Freud and personality structure, we have the id, it's the energy constantly striving to satisfy basic drives, pleasure principle. What about the ego? The ego here seeks to gratify the the id in realistic ways, so in some real ways, reality principle. Then the super ego, voice of conscious that focuses on how we ought to behave. Okay, so let's have an example here for this. If you are a high school student and you have just 2 weeks to leave the school or to finish your school, and you are used to go to buy the sandwich for $1 every day. You go buy to buy the sandwich from school for just $1, and one day before you leave before you leave the school, you got there and you saw that somebody else was buying the sandwich just for 5 cents. So what you will feel? You will feel that you are that the seller was stealing you, was lying to you, right? So we have here the three components of the personality structure. The id here, the energy constant striving to satisfy basic drives, so you want to get back your money. So you can say to yourself, I can get into the shop and get my money back. The ego seeks to gratify the id in realistic ways. So you can say to yourself, but there are cameras, they can catch me anyway. The super ego, voice of conscious that focuses on how we ought to behave, here you can tell yourself, no, maybe I didn't ask about the the price of the sandwich. Maybe I wasn't I was in hurry every day, was in hurry to buy it, and I didn't ask about the money. So this is the super ego here. Or maybe I will talk to the seller in and negotiate what happens, and negotiate to get back my money. Or I can go to the administration to have a complaint. So this is the super ego. This is how we ought to behave. So the ed uses the most primitive of thinking process. The ed operates in our on the pleasure principle. So pleasure, I want my money back right now. So seeks pleasure and avoids pain. I want what I want now. It operates completely at an unconscious level, no direct contact with reality. So the id has two major instincts. Eros, life instinct, here motivate people to focus on pleasure seeking tendencies. We have the thanatos, death instinct, here motivates people to use aggressive argues to destroy. So this is very here dangerous, is to stick to the id and here ignore the ego and the super ego. In your personality, the ego consists of what? A conscious. Here the conscious faculty for perceiving and dealing intelligently with reality. So I have to use the reality here to face the problem. The ego acts as a mediator between the id and the superego. The ego is partly conscious, deals with the demands for of reality, makes rational here decisions. So the ego serves the id, right, the rational part of personality that maintains what? Contact with reality. Governed by what? The reality principle, of course. What consequences are there to my behavior? So this is a very important question here, explaining the ego. I will ask myself, oh, I can be caught if I steal the money, and I know that's my money. He deserves that. I will take this money back from him. But what are the consequences? This is the most important question. The ego is the executive of the personality. Here the ego controls the higher mental process, reasoning, problem solving. The ego uses these higher mental processes to help satisfy the urges of the id. What about the super ego? The super ego, the moral part of personality, and this is the most important part of personality. Internalized rules of parents and society. Super ego consists of two parts we are having here: the conscious and the ego ideal. So notions of right and wrong. So I want to know this is right, this is wrong, the awareness of right and wrong, and the ego ideal, how we ideally like to be. Superego constrains here us from gratifying every impulse, murder, because they are immoral and not because we might get caught. Because we might get caught, this is for the ego. But this is immoral. So when I say this is immoral, so this is what here it my I am here dealing with the super ego here, partly conscious, partly unconscious. According to Freud, an individual's feelings, thoughts, and behaviors are the results of what? The result of the interaction of, this is very important here sentence, this is the interaction of the id, super ego, and the ego. The three parts of here, the three parts interaction here gives me the Freud's here, the Freud's theory. The id and the ego and the super ego are continually in conflict with one another. Yeah, here it differs from one person to another. This conflict generates something called anxiety. If the ego didn't effectively handle the resulting anxiety, people would be so overwhelmed with anxiety that they wouldn't be able to carry on with the tasks of everyday's living. So the ego tries to control anxiety here. What's the conflict? It's like here a quarrel or conflict between three things. The ego tries to control what? The anxiety, to reduce the anxiety through the use of ego defense mechanism. Here I'm trying to defend my anxiety. Maybe I can, if I stick to my anxiety and here ignored the ego and the super ego, I will be gone to the to jail, I think so. So what does it mean, ego defense mechanism? Let's talk about it. Definition here, it's the defense mechanism is a psychology, it's a psychology tendency that the ego, here I'm using the ego, uses to help prevent people from becoming overwhelmed by the conflict or the resulting of the anxiety, of course, among the ego and the super ego. So the defense mechanisms operates at an unconscious level. Okay, what does it mean unconscious level? Remember, we are unaware of them, the unconscious level, during the time that we are actually using them. However, we may later become aware of their previous operation and use. If we want to know them, we will know them, or we will be aware of them. So, I'm having here something very simple called repression, regression, and reaction, rationalization, denial, displacement, and projection sublimation. Let's talk about here repression, the first part here. So I'm talking here about something called what? Defense mechanism. Pushing here, what about the repression? Pushing unacceptable and anxiety producing thoughts into the unconscious. What does it mean? Involves intentional forgetting but not consciously done. Repressed here material can be memorized or unacceptable impulses. How? Example, a rap victim cannot recall the details of the attack. Here I'm trying to do what? I'm trying to forget. So if I'm supposed to a very bad crime or a very bad memory, something defend our brains, not just for this example. If somebody faces a very bad situation or accident, they lose maybe one of their relatives, one of their sons or something like this, they try to forget. Why the brain tries to protect itself here from getting damaged? Because the accident was very very bad. They can't here deal with it. So here this was the regression. What about the regression? Acting in ways characteristic of earlier life stages, earlier stage of personality. What? Like what? Let's have an example to understand it. A young adult, anxious on a trip to his parents' home, sits in the corner reading comic books as he often did in grade school. So this is what I'm acting as if in my earlier stages of personality. Maybe you can find your parents acting like the earlier life stages. They try to watch their favorite cartoon, Ninja Turtles, for example. They're trying to have here the same earlier stages. Reaction formation, replacing an anxiety producing feeling with its exact opposite, typically going overboard. Repressed thoughts appear as mirrors opposites. What does it mean? A man who is anxious about his interest in for example, so a man here who is anxious for in gay men, so this is very unethical, and this is here against religion. So what should he do? He should here meet women for marriage in the future. So, rationalization. What about rationalization? Creating here false but believable excuses to justify inappropriate behavior. Real motive for behavior is not accepted by ego. Let's have an example of this. A student cheats on an exam, explaining that cheating is legitimate on an unfair examination. So, why are you cheating in the exam? This is unethical and this is against law. He explains this to himself that the exam was unfair. So, it's unfair to examine me. So, he gives himself some excuses. What about denial? Here, claiming and believing that something which is actually true is false. So I'm denying here. So a person disbelieves that she's age, asserting that I'm not getting older. So I'm denying thing. Displacement, redirecting emotional feelings like anger to substitute target, includes or involves directing unacceptable impulses onto a less threatening object person. For example, a husband angry at the way his boss treated him screams at his children, "Come, hey, my children, I will put all my anger on you." And instead of telling your professor what you really think of her, you tailgate and harass a slow driver on your way home from school. So, projection, attributing one's own unacceptable feelings or beliefs to others, perceiving the external world in terms of one's own personal conflicts. What does it mean? Let's have it by an example to be easier. An employee at a store tempted to steal some merchandise suspects that other employees are stealing. Yeah, if you are doing something wrong, or if you are a thief, you think all the people around you are thieves. Sublimation, substitute here socially acceptable behavior for unacceptable impulses. Example, playing video games instead of getting in a fight. So instead I will get in a fight now with you, so I'll go and play video game instead of this. So Freud's psychoanalytical theory of personality suggests that personality develops through what? A series of stages, each of which is associated with a major biological function. More specifically, here Freud theorized that as people age, they pass through several systematic stages of psychosexual development in their personality. So, let's stop at this point, and then we will complete in other videos. I hope you understood everything. Please study well from the presentation here, from the video, and from the PowerPoint until we meet. Thank you for listening, my dear students. Bye bye.